Is it up for debate if we want to add his recent fight with Chandler to the list? It was a tough one for Dustin, given all the dirty play. Find out if we did. In today's video, we'll talk about Poirier's top 5 best fights. Not just that, we'll go over the 5 worst ones too. Sorry, Dustin. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting with number 5, Dustin versus Carlos Diego. Dustin Poirier was like, ain't no way I'm staying at 145. Frankly, good call. It would have been quite bad for his health, especially after competing at featherweight for several years. The man who goes by the Diamond then faced Carlos Diego Ferreira in his UFC lightweight debut in 2015. Within 4 minutes of the first round, 3:45 to be precise, arrested and very energetic version of Poirier used his boxing to repeatedly score blows on the Brazilian and eventually knock him out. At 155 pounds, having the betting odds in his favor also marked the beginning of a long and successful career. Moving on to number 4, Poirier against Eddie Alvarez. Wait just a minute. Can our boy fight without getting fouled? Anyway, when Eddie Alvarez illegally kneed Justin Poirier in the head during their first encounter, it was ruled out as a no contest. But then in the summer of 2018, the two reconnected and headlined a UFC on Fox event. We all know how good Eddie's grapples are, right? Well, Poirier did as well, so he worked his way around and overcame Alvarez's grappling in round 1, and then began to startle him with some pretty strong blows. This resulted in a finishing move in round 2 that gave the Louisiana native a second TKO victory and a performance of the night bonus. Now for Trace. Dustin defeats Justin Gaethje. It's safe to say that Poirier's most difficult victory was the historic lightweight matchup with Justin Gaethje. Poirier felt the sting of Gaethje's countless leg kicks, even though he routinely landed on him through the first 3 rounds. Poirier's movement was hindered in round 4. The former interim lightweight champion somehow managed to connect with a precisely timed counter left cross that caught Gaethje off guard. Off guard? They're more like guards on vacation. Before the referee decided enough was enough and declared the fight over, Poirier chased his opponent down and continued to throw potent combinations. For numero dos, Dustin Poirier versus Max Holloway. Poirier competed against Max Holloway for the interim UFC lightweight title after defeating Eddie Alvarez in the summer of 2018. The top-ranked lightweight could control Holloway for the entirety of the bout by using his superior boxing skills and stature advantage, landing devastating combinations. Well, for a crux, we'd say that Poirier won this fight by a unanimous decision of 49-46 on all 3 judges' scorecards because of his measured approach. Boy, was it measured. Finally, for number 1, Poirier against the Notorious, the rematch. So the Diamond has risen to become the second-ranked athlete by the end of 2020, only behind Khabib Nurmagomedov, and we know who the top used to get. Dustin earned his place to compete against the former foe Conor McGregor in a rematch planned for 7 years. Poirier approached the situation with considerably more composure and assurance this time. He used his boxing combinations while moving forward to unload on McGregor after taking the first round's hard shots from the Irishman. We know what that sounds like. Please. This was the only way to word it. He finally connected with a strong short right uppercut that knocked McGregor. Poirier celebrated his biggest career victory as the referee abruptly halted play. Okay, so now that we've talked about the best, let's talk about the worst fights. Starting with number 5, the Chan Sung Jung defeat. Poirier was given a chance to face Chan Sung Jung as the main event of a UFC fight night after establishing a 5-bout winning run. The two got into a very entertaining fight, named the Fight of the Evening. However, Jung continually had the upper hand against Poirier during the 4 rounds. And finally, after securing a Bravo choke, the Korean Zombie eventually submitted Poirier in the 4th round to win. On number 4, the fight against Charles Oliveira. At UFC 269, Poirier faced Charles Oliveira for a second chance to win the lightweight title in the UFC. After a solid opening round, in which Poirier hit the then-champion hard, Oliveira switched to his grappling in round 2 and held the opponent at bay for 5 uninterrupted minutes. Due to Oliveira's intense pressure, Poirier began to tire and eventually submitted to the champion in the 3rd round. This marked Poirier's second missed opportunity to win the lightweight title. It's okay, we know he'll get it sooner or later. Not to forget number 3, Dustin versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. Well, to be fair, You knew this would be here, didn't you? So despite getting a strong combination on arguably the best fighter UFC has seen, Dustin Poirier spent most of his title fight with Nurmagomedov in survival mode. Poirier was defeated by the Russian native's brutal grappling and ultimately submitted in a rear naked chokehold. Despite losing against the unbeaten Nurmagomedov, Poirier demonstrated his tenacity by attempting a guillotine submission to counter the champion's wrestling offensive. That was impressive. Now, for number 2, the McGregor fight. Since entering the UFC, Conor McGregor has amassed a 3-0 record, and the organization was prepared to boost his difficulty. This came from Poirier, a top 10 ranked featherweight at the time. Before entering the cage, Conor used his signature pre-fight antics to get into Poirier's head. And guess what? It worked. Poirier fell to the notorious Irishman in the opening round. After the defeat, Poirier had a bad night and decided to move up to lightweight. As we said already, 145 wasn't suitable for him. Lastly, for numero uno, the loss against Michael Johnson. The most shocking defeat of Dustin Poirier's career was the most devastating defeat in the Octagon. No, for real. Since moving up to lightweight, he had amassed a perfect 4-0 record, earning a spot in the main event fight against Michael Johnson. Poirier was predicted to triumph over Johnson and advance further up the divisional ladder. Like they all say, a super unpredictable sport. Luckily, Johnson delivered a precisely timed counter right hook that put Poirier to the ground as soon as it hit. Before calling it off, the native of Missouri chased Poirier down and continued the nasty ground and pound. After suffering the worst knockout of his career, the Louisiana native fell within the second minute of the first round. Fun fact, the man has only suffered 2 defeats since this one, the Oliveira one and the Khabib one. Puts it into perspective how good a fighter he is. What else? Well, you might be wondering about the Chandler fight. Sadly, it didn't make a list, but boy, did Dustin speak up about this one. Poirier called Michael Chandler a dirty fighter in his post-fight interview with Rogan. Poirier claimed that Chandler pushed his fingers into Dustin's mouth to get an advantage for a rear naked choke. Following this statement, the fighters exchanged insults. In another interview, the press told Poirier that it was an accident, but our boy wasn't buying any of it and said it was intentional. Okay, Chandler, don't accidentally put your fingers in another person's mouth. Feel a whole mouth guard and then continue pulling up. More from Poirier. Poirier stated it sucks that he never got to fight Nate Diaz. Not just that, he downplayed a potential 4th fight with McGregor. Dustin Poirier has spent his whole career pursuing world championships, so he has never been overly focused on a particular opponent. But there is this one fight he has desired that appears unlikely to ever happen, especially now, when the other guy has said his goodbyes to the UFC. Following the cancellation of his fight against Nate Diaz in 2018, Poirier persisted in seeking another opponent. But despite all of his efforts, the fight could never really happen. Being a free agent, Diaz makes it quite unlikely that he would ever participate in the organization again. Although it doesn't necessarily consume him, Poirier acknowledges that he poured his heart out, saying that he wished the Diaz bout had taken place before he left the UFC. During UFC 280 Media Day, Poirier stated that it might go down as one of his regrets. And for the last bit, Dustin talked about a possible 4th match with the Notorious. While saying anything was possible in the game, he hinted that he wanted a change after having already fought the Irishman thrice. It turns out it's not going to happen for 6 months, as Conor is still out. We all know why. Your wife is in me DMs. But no, he needs to go under 6 months of drug testing, as Dana and the USADA stated, to get back in the Octagon. Plus, frankly, we think it'd get repetitive if it goes down soon. Anyway, that's a wrap for today's video. Do you think we ranked these right? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed. See you at the next one. Peace.